Good afternoon, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joes, mid-afternoon Joes, actually. Brought to you by Grey Duck Vodka and Total Sports Entertainment. Next time you're at the liquor store, check out Grey Duck Vodka. It is the vodka by Vikings legend Chad Greenway, and Total Sports Entertainment. Check out their website. They have some of the best Minnesota sports merchandise you can find anywhere. It's actually really amazing. I am Joe Johnson, the host of this show and the owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. Here, back, finally, with Mr. Joe Oberle, who was out of town for the last show for Memorial Day, like a normal human with a life. But we missed you, man, or I missed you, I guess. I'm not comfortable with affection, so I'll have to say we missed you.
Well, thanks. It's weird taping this in the afternoon. I actually now feel like having a Grey Duck vodka. Morning Joes, I would have to pour it in my coffee, but I don't drink coffee, so.
Yeah, what is that? An Irish coffee? We'll call it a Scandinavian coffee.
Or a Russian coffee.
So were you? Yeah, totally. Joe's the editor of the aforementioned websites, by the way, and he has a press pass, so he gets to do all sorts of really cool stuff. You were at the Vikings Media Day. That was today, right? The golf thing?
Yep, out at Mystic Lake this morning. They had the media out there for 9 holes at Mystic Lake Golf Course. Then this afternoon, they're teeing off about 1 o'clock. All the players and alumni of the Vikings come out with a bunch of corporate sponsors, and they all get to play for a charity. For the numerous charities the Vikings contribute to, all the money goes to them. And I'm not sure, I'm sure Vikings children's things that they do, the many things. I'm not sure of all the charities, but they do a lot, and it's a great event. So it's nice to have the media out there, and my team was competitive for the first time in years.
Was it best ball? I thought I heard them talking about it on Common Man, like it was groups of 4 split into 2 teams of 2, and they did best ball or something?
No, it was a scramble. Scramble. Okay. Typically, everybody hits and shot, and they go to where the best drive is, and then you all play in from there, and you go from there. It's a scramble. So we had, I apologize for not knowing his last name. We had Chad from the game operations department there, who was a former hockey player at MSU Mankato, and just a huge hitter of the ball. And he carried us. I and Tim Yoder, and then Chris Corzo from the Vikings website and VEN was our foursome. And, Kelly Klein was supposed to play with us, but she was injured. And had she done so, we would have won this thing walking away. She's one of the best golfers there, and she had an injury and couldn't play. But we were tied we finished tied with like 2 or other groups, including Common Man and the K-Fan group, at 2 under, and we lost in a scorecard playoff, which is a cause for total bitterness on my part, to be so close to getting a Vikings trophy with this signif on it, and did not get there. We missed several putts that were makeable, and so I'm kind of
that would have been really, really cool.
It would have been. I'm kind of bummed. I heard on the way home, Common Man on the radio crowing about it. He says, "Yeah, we've won 4 of the last 7, and we've been out of the winners' money for the past 3 years. So it was great to get back in the winners' circle." And they did it when they got a scorecard playoff, which is one of the worst things in golf. In hockey, they have the best playoff you can ever find. Go watch the NHL playoffs and see what their overtime is like. It's the greatest. Well, golf has the worst as far as the scorecard playoff.
How does that work? I actually lettered in golf in high school, and the longtime listeners to the program will know that I am horrible at golf, and I'm really glad that I am not representing any aspect of our site at things like that, because I would not only lose any credibility that we've built over the years, but I would probably damage multiple very expensive cars in the parking lot.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that. There's a lot of nice cars out there. But it's, when they go to a scorecard playoffs because they don't have time to play extra holes, it's it's the deal where they pick a hole, maybe the toughest handicap hole, and whoever scored well on that particular hole takes it. And they picked 18, and we parred it, and they birdied it, so they took the top honors. And
that is so brutal.
I know. That's a bad beat, that's for sure. But it was fun playing. It was fun being out there, and a nice day for golf. And I wrote this last year for our site about. I'm just amazed at all the things that the Vikings do for charities. I used to work for the Timberwolves for 6 years, and I saw all the things they do, which is there's plenty. But you've got 12 players on the roster compared to 53 for Vikings, and all those people are get out in the community and do so many things. And you had Kyle Rudolph being a near man of the year in the NFL last year, so it's really neat what they do, and it was just fun to be part of it.
We've talked about that a little bit on the show, and just over the course of the weeks and months, how great the ownership is of this team and how little credit people give them. We're doing a fun roundtable that'll be up on Friday across both sides, Purple PTSD and Vikings territory. And we'll get into this later at the end of the show, but basically the question is, it's like one of those comic books, like a what-if comic. Like, what if Captain America was a Nazi, or just fun stuff like that. And the question is, if you could go back in time and change one specific thing about the Vikings from your lifetime, so it could be
just one?
Yeah, but it could be like, I know. It could be like a transaction, a trade, a specific play, so on and so forth. And the one that I chose, obviously, was the trading of Randy Moss after the 2004 season. And I actually ended up writing like a 2,500 word piece when it's supposed to be like a paragraph or two about that. And a big part of it was that the Wolves didn't want McCombs to trade Moss before they bought the team, but he did it anyway because he's Red McCombs. And, every day I drive by downtown Minneapolis and I look at the area around the stadium that used to just be desolate. There was nothing really there. A lot of Star Tribune buildings that weren't necessarily being used to their full potential. I worked at the Liquor Depot on Washington right by the stadium in college, and there just wasn't a whole lot going on. And they're putting up condos left and right. The entire neighborhood is completely different. And a lot of that is a testament to the stadium. And I know people don't like that public money went into the stadium, and that's a completely different issue. But I do feel like the owners, this is a world-class organization. The TCO is a testament to that, the quality of their new headquarters. I think Kevin Warren going to helm the Big Ten also is a sign of just how good or how well this team is run. There were 60 candidates for that position, and he got it, and that's a really big deal, and it's another testament to it. So I was just going to say, you can't get mad. Despite the lack of Super Bowl wins, I think they're doing everything you would want them to do.
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that, because we were just talking about that with Chad after the round, and I think you're exactly spot on. They don't get a lot of credit for what they do, because the biggest profile thing they did, building that new stadium, they got so much negative publicity as a result of people taking taxpayer money and blah blah blah, and not enough of their own money. And the thing is, he was mentioning, now he works for the team. He's been there 22 years, and he's certainly in support of it. But it seemed like he was being very honest and forthright and candid, and just saying that whenever there's something where the Wolves need to step up regarding the team on the field in order to win, he said they have never shied away. In fact, they're always very willing to do it. They really want the team to win. They really are concerned about getting a Super Bowl champion here, and I really believe that. And it shouldn't be hard to see that when you contrast them to the previous ownership that you just mentioned. It couldn't have been more opposite. Red McCombs did not care. He wanted to get in, buy low and sell high with the Vikings, and it's exactly what he did. And that was his concern when he was divesting assets like Randy Moss. My goodness, you got, I think, say what you will about the Wolves or whatever, have you think about them, but and building the stadium. But my goodness, I like them as owners, and I think they do a great job in trying to put winning football team on the field.
And it is the polar opposite. I mean, there was the I think McCombs got fined by the league because he was so far under the salary cap that he tried to jerry-rig some salary cap. I think it was Winfield's salary cap money to get to the bare minimum, and they busted him for it. Totally. And then obviously we're on the other side of that with the team not having a whole lot of money, and that storyline seems to have abated a little bit, thank God. The first thing we aren't going to talk about today is the Kyle Rudolph situation, which seems to I don't think that they've settled on any sort of extension or anything, but it seems like he's going to be with the team and they're going to figure it out one way or another. Anyway, but the OTAs mandatory minicamp is next week. They had some more practices. Diggs, one of the big storylines out of that was the fact that Diggs was not there again. I don't see
Joe.
See a lot. Yeah.
Before you go there, do I get to tell you my draft or my pick or my plays that, or are we going to talk about that later?
I think we'll do it later because I'm going to get really, really in depth about it.
Okay.
I know I kind of spoiled my own take, but there's a lot to it. But the Diggs thing, I think, is it's voluntary, and a lot of the star Vikings in recent years, AP being one of them, didn't go to OTAs either. I do think that it's a net positive, just in that it's giving the team the opportunity to run a lot of guys with the first team as like wide receiver 2, a la Jordan Taylor, or Jeff Badette has been out there. But you hear mostly about Jordan Taylor because he had that amazing sideline toe touch grab touchdown, and he seems to be the guy to beat in regards to the third wide receiver position at this point. Is that what you noticed being there?
Well, I've heard a lot of talk about Jordan Taylor, and I'll be honest, the 2 times I was there, I wasn't there this week for the practice. I had to go down to Mankato for a family deal, but I have not seen him do as much as I think others have, because people are really high on him. I saw him make a couple plays, but I think I need to see more of him before I really say that he's the guy to beat. I certainly don't think Treadwell is.
No.
But, I think they're going to – I think you're exactly right. They shouldn't be worried about Diggs being here. They know what they've got in Diggs. He's going to be here, and how hard a worker he is, and how, dedicated he is to winning and playing well. So they don't have to worry about that a whole heck of a lot. And it gives them the opportunity to look at someone like Taylor and give Treadwell his last shot, which hasn't been going so far. I have noticed that.
Well, but, I saw the one big play that went quote-unquote viral, just Vikings viral, of Treadwell in shorts by himself. There was no one else on the field catching like a pass he would like during a combine QB drill or something, and everyone was getting all hyped up. And it's like, he's a pro athlete. He's going to look good in shorts without anybody covering him. That's not really the issue. The issue is when he has pads on and he has to pick up a tough first down. He seems to, like you've said, he mentally just chokes.
Joe, I could catch a pass with nobody covering me, but I'm not sure I look that good in shorts. So I don't know, but I don't know. I'm concerned about him. I really don't know. I thought that he might be the guy that might be odd man out, but I don't think they gain much by cutting him, and there's some dead cap money there, so they probably won't. This will be his last year, and what have you, unless things dramatically change. But they've got so many other players behind them that they do need to look at and figure out what they have there, and young players that are good and have plenty of skills and what they're looking for, and they're going to want to look at him, and they're going to get some shots. And you've seen a lot of that. I mean, I saw Jeff Badette making plays in OTAs. I saw Chad Beebe making his usual plays over the middle, and just quicker than greased lightning watching him play. And they got the young guys who have made some catches too. So I think I think Laquan has waited too long to make his mark, and he's going to get less opportunities to show what he's got rather than more as they go forward, because the Vikings have to see what they have in players that they haven't had a chance to do.
Definitely,
so.
And that's kind of been the argument I've had with people. We actually kind of covered this on the show over Memorial Day weekend, in that things changed pretty dramatically from when the mindset of when they spent a first-round pick on him, expecting him to be a 1. They didn't know what they really had in Thielen at that time. Otherwise, I don't think they would have even used that pick on a wide receiver, obviously.
Yep.
And so, what his expectations were, they had a complete. Now they've had multiple quarterbacks since then. It was going to be Teddy, who wasn't necessarily known for deep balls. They wanted the guy who could run 10 yards and catch a contested ball, which was more Teddy's speed than Cousins. So I've heard from people saying that he just hasn't had the opportunities because of Diggs and Thielen, and that's partially true, but he has had some opportunities that a guy like Jarius Wright took advantage of and had clutch first downs, and he just hasn't been able to do that. So the question becomes, obviously this is where we cover the team and it's OTAs and we're looking for things to talk about. So having these guys as like a topic 1A is cool for us because we're into it, but at the same time their impact isn't going to be that much during the season, especially when you look at maybe what they're going to do with Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr., kind of taking up the touches that might otherwise go to a third receiver, which is a little more intriguing to me, just in what I've learned about Kubiak and how he runs his offenses and the success that he's had. And it sounds like in the day that Rudolph was there, I think he missed one day for a charity thing, and then he was there. He got 2 touchdowns across the middle from Cousins, which was encouraging. But have you seen anything out of Irv Smith Jr.? I don't see a lot of articles being written about him, mainly because people are focused on wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I saw him getting plenty of action. I mean, he has played with the 2s and the 1s, and when Kyle was gone, he certainly. I was at one practice where Rudolph was not there, and you saw Irv Smith getting some opportunities with the 1, and he looks good catching the ball. I don't think I was surprised he doesn't seem as big as I thought he was. Now maybe I'm used to staring at Rudolph, because he's a pretty big dude, and so maybe that'll come. And I haven't really had a chance to see what he is as a blocker yet because I haven't focused on that and they're not in pads. But, so far so good with him, and they're going to give every opportunity to get him on the field this year and use him. I mean, they took him high and whether with Rudolph, whether he stays or goes this year, I agree with you. I think he'll stay. It's still uncertain for next year, and I'm sure they selected Smith with that in mind. So I think he's going to get every opportunity, and I think once he gets coached up in the pro game and the Vikings way of doing things, you're going to see a lot out of him that you'll like.
My dad's going to hate this, but I wouldn't be surprised if throughout the course of the season, between the 20s, so from their 20 to our 20 to their 20. Smith Jr. maybe being on the field more than Rudolph, just because it's at least from what he did in college. I think he's a more competent blocker. At least that was the grade on him. So he might actually be out there more often than Rudolph, and I could see Rudolph being more of a red zone threat in that regard. But speaking of blocking, I don't think we were able to talk about something that was last week, which was because I know you and I were kind of going back and forth in regards to Bradbury and Elflein, and we kind of assumed where they would end up, but we didn't know for sure, and it seems like they've pretty much confirmed the move of Elflein to left guard and Bradbury at center. What have your thoughts been on that?
They certainly have been lining up that way in the OTAs that I've been to, and they're, like they said beforehand, they're going to give everybody a chance to see what works best. And I think that's an indication when they start out of the gate of OTAs lining up that way and giving Bradbury those reps there, that will be the way things end up, unless they find something markedly bad about it and they have to change it up. But I think you'll see both as they go forward. I think you have said many times and wrote about that Elflein prefers playing guard and Bradbury's the center. The thing I noticed, I actually watched them for quite a while at the last week's OTA, and I was just kind of focusing in on Bradbury, and it was kind of interesting. They were doing these little drills, and I included it in my write-up how he was leaning forward, before the snap was called on every drill he was on, and the coaches didn't correct it. I don't know if they didn't see it, but when you're lining up and you're going through drills fast, and it was subtle. If he does that in games constantly, he's going to get some penalties. But
I was just going to ask, that's got to be some sort of penalty. I'm trying to think of which it would be.
Oh, it'd be a false
start. Yeah.
Because I mean, he would lean up with his, everybody else has got their fist in the dirt, but he's got his hand up because he's, snapping the ball, and you just see him kind of leaning forward, anticipating the snap, and if it happens once, it's no big deal. But I kept seeing him doing it. I was going, He's gonna have to get that cleaned up pretty quick because and it's subtle, it's hard to see, and it's just a drill, so it's no big deal. It's not like they were going against anybody, but he's so quick getting out. I noticed getting out to the outside to pick up somebody coming in from off the line, and I thought to myself, well, maybe that's why he's got to have a step. But I'm sure I'm making more out of something than there's there. But it's just something I noticed. I kind of found it interesting. But I think just what I was impressed with was how quick he was, and I think that's going to be a great thing with the kind of offense or the kind of zone blocking scheme that they want to do. And so I'm kind of excited about him at center.
Yeah, it sounds like Brian O'Neill talked a little bit about that. I think the quote was that the Dennison and Kubiak were pressing the gas in regards to the run game and focusing more on athleticism and getting their guys kind of out, being proactive as opposed to reactive. And it sounds like things are going well in that regard. Granted, there's not a whole lot. I mean, they're not wearing pads or anything. But one guy that a few of the guys, our writers, are completely obsessed with is Hercules Mataafa, who was out last season, his rookie year, because of an ACL tear. And it sounds like he's put on like 35 pounds in muscle this offseason. The knock against him was that he was undersized. But that having been said, as a 3-tech, he was the second best in the entire country statistically. He was actually 7th out of 200 in rankings of the Power 5 conferences, but he was only one of 2 guys to finish with the run grade and a pass rush grade above 85. I think he was like a 90 against the run and an 86 against the pass. So he could be what people thought Sharif Floyd was, or what they thought they were getting out of what's his face from Seattle. But he is undersized, so I don't know if you've seen him. I've seen some articles that have said that he kind of was schooling Bradbury in some of the drills.
I did not see that. I did not notice it, and I didn't focus on him, so I can't really comment. Although such as those things has never stopped me in the past, but from commenting. But I have been really kind of focusing on the offense past couple weeks, so I won't say anything to that. If he has been schooling them, that the defense is always ahead in these kind of things because they're reacting and the offense has got more to learn, and certainly a rookie center coming into the league's not only got to pick up the terminology, it's got to pick up the speed, he's got to pick up everything whereas a defender is just moving from what he sees, and he can. It's possible that that's true, but I don't know.
It's funny. I was listening to Common Man the other day, and he was talking about how much he dislikes OTAs, mainly because he said it's hard to get excited about anything because if you I think he was referring to an interception that Kendricks had, and he's like, should I get excited that he got the interception, or should I be disappointed that Cousins threw the interception? It's kind of hard to. Any play is a positive and a negative at the same time.
That's true.
What I think is interesting.
The defense certainly got excited about that, but go ahead.
Well, and I've heard stuff like Kendricks was chirping at the ref that C.J. Ham was out of bounds and the clock shouldn't be running, and Harrison Smith walked over and was like, "Dude, it doesn't matter. Like, why do you care?" But it sounds like one thing that kind of concerns me is obviously the offense is going to be going through a lot of changes, an entirely new playbook, a new system. But Zimmer, there was an article on Vikings.com where Zimmer was talking about how he's been watching different teams from around the league and how they set up defensively against offenses that the Vikings faced a lot, and making tweaks and making sure that they're quote-unquote one step ahead of the changes that teams are making to counteract what they do normally. And that just really kind of reminds me of last season and the slow start and maybe Zimmer overthinking things and trying to come up with this perfect defense, maybe after being exposed by Doug Peterson and the Eagles. And so I don't know if you've noticed any confusion by the defenders or any drastic changes, or Zimmer being more hands-on than usual, or people having to figure out where they line up or anything like that.
I haven't seen that per se. I did, when I was there last week, and I saw that, the defense was really winning the day when they were doing 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 drills, I thought. But there was one play that time and time again that kept really fooling all of them, and whether it was Cousins doing it or one of the other quarterbacks, and it was a play action pass where they would sprint out, where Cousins would sprint out left or right, and obviously looked like it was going to be a running play in the line, and then he would fake the handoff and do a complete reverse and go to the other side of the field, and the defense was sucking in, and they were fine. That the quarterback would then have a running back in the flat, wide open, that they had to quick stop, pivot, race back out there and try to knock him out of bounds. But sometimes it's going in for a score, or generally it was a completed pass, and it made him look really bad. And the fact that I said to one guy from Vikings.com, I said, they seem to be missing that play every time. He goes, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And
it was a play-action play, you said?
I believe so. I mean, it looked like, a bootleg or play-action kind of bootleg left, but then Cousins would turn completely the other way and do a bootleg to the right.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and it seemed to me that it was pretty long developing, and it shouldn't have been that difficult, but the defense was sucking into that first play fake, and then he would pivot around, turn on, and there was either a fullback or Madison leaking out into the flat. He was wide open. It's like, wow, I'm sure they'll get that cleaned up, and it's OTAs. You never, that's our job, to go out there and comment on these things, and it's something that they'll see on tape. They'll be very embarrassed. They'll wonder why the heck they were sucking in, what they were missing. But they're not doing anything that's going to be vital in their playbook for the media. That's for sure. But I saw it happen 3 or 4 times, and I was just scratching my head. It's like, guys, I can see that coming. Come on.
It sounds like that's going to be. That reminds me of a quote that I read just before the show from Thielen, which was about the increased amount of play-action passes that they wanted to do this season and how they've been implementing them, and how it's really hard for the defense if it's handled correctly, because they have to basically guess which is which if they do it right. And my memory is not the best in general, but it gets skewed by emotion. In a lot of the games last year, I was really not very happy, so I don't remember specifically, but I don't think they did a whole lot of play action stuff last year.
Not as much as we thought we were going to get. You're exactly right. Cousins came in as the play action quarterback, and that's what we heard coming in, and that was his forte. He was really good at, and that's why they wanted him. And maybe that was part of the reason why Zimmer was frustrated with the offense, how it was being run by John DeFilippo, because maybe that's what he expected as well and wasn't seeing.
And if they're not running the ball, they can't set that up.
Yes, exactly. So I do think, and that's kind of what Zimmer wants to do, and it's emphasizing this year. You said something earlier that made me think for a second that totally new offense that the offense has got to go through, and I'm wondering. Stefanski's the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for the last 4 games. I'm sure he didn't have a time to. They just ran DeFilippo's offense, but they ran it probably more like Zimmer wanted to do it. But this just makes me think of, it's not in contradiction to what you're saying, but I really wonder how much of Stefanski's offense and how much of Kubiak's it's going to be. I don't know if we'll ever know that for sure until we really get into it and see what they're doing and have somebody respond to it. You're not going to see Kubiak, come and talk and answer questions with the media about it because he doesn't have to. That's the OC's job. And actually, Stefanski is quite good at it, from what I've seen so far. But I really wonder how much newness there's going to be, how much difference it's going to be, whose it's going to be. So I guess bottom line, it's not going to be DeFilippo's offense. It's going to be different for the most part, but it really remains to be seen whose it really is.
Which isn't the worst thing in the world. I know everyone kind of got a little bit high on Stefanski based on how his first game went, and they were going essentially against the worst, I think it was the Dolphins, the worst defense in the league, or the worst rushing defense anyway, and they looked like Adrian Peterson era Vikings for a while. And then it went back to looking like DeFilippo, basically a bunch of 3-and-outs, and it just was terrible. That raises a question, too, in your point of view at OTAs, the practices you were at. Did you notice Kubiak maybe interacting with the offense more than Stefanski, or just in how you said that, like, we'll know during the first preseason game, we'll see who's on the sideline, maybe who's up in the box, so on and so forth. But during practice, what did you see?
To be honest, I haven't even clued into Kubiak and seen him out there, or really paid that much attention to either him or Stefanski. I've been really trying to I've been to 2 practices. That's all. Media's been there for a total of 3, and in those times I was trying to get used to watching some of the players and seeing what they're doing, really, rather than watching whether or not the coaches were interacting and who was doing that. I think Stefanski's going to be the guy who does that. I think I see Kubiak as more as a big picture guy who will not necessarily be out there. In camp, I'm sure they'll all be out there talking to players because there's so many to talk to at one time. But I think Stefanski's going to be the guy that implements his offense, and he'll get his input before and after practices from Kubiak. So
I'm really excited about it. The more that I've delved into Kubiak's history, the more I'm honestly surprised that he was even available. He seems to be really good at what he does. He seems to be able to turn sub 25 ranked offenses into top 10 offenses over the course of just one off season, or even as a head coach, turning 3, like Zimmer did, 3-13 teams into playoff caliber teams. And I'm sure the situation in Denver was tenuous, and there's a lot of pressure there. And they're not in a dissimilar situation than the Vikings, where after Teddy got injured with a really good defense, but struggling to establish a franchise quarterback that they've developed themselves. So that's going to be a huge part of this, and it was actually it was the impetus for an article that I wrote that I don't think you and I got to talk about on the show, which was basically, I think the headline was not completely misleading, but I think people saw the headline and it kind of formed their opinion before they read the entire article, which is something that we deal with all the time as writers for the team. But the headline was, "The Vikings are all in 2019 in every sense of the word, or words." And basically that was based on the fact that they brought Kubiak in, another former head coach, in the coaching room, that they have to really lean on Brzezinski to pull out his magic wand and shift money around, which he's done fantastically, hence the analogy with the magic wand. But, it's at this point, every offseason they've been able to find money to bring in people, big free agents, so on and so forth. It's been different this offseason. They've basically had to have players restructure their contracts just to sign draft picks. That's not something that we're used to. And considering some of the core players that are going to be looking for extensions this year, Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, so on and so forth. I think Mike Harris is going to be a restricted free agent. You have the Kyle Rudolph situation. It does feel like, and I said this, while it isn't impossible for them to do better next year, I don't think the team will look the same, and I think their best chance to actually make a run is this year.
You think you think they'll look better next year cap wise, or as a team, or I don't.
I think they're going to lose some of the core players next year. I think Trey Waynes or Mackenzie Alexander is going to be gone. I think that they might. Yeah, I think they're going to lose a few of their core guys on defense, and I think that, or even Kyle Rudolph, and losing those guys that they put so much time and effort into. A first-round pick in Waynes, a second-round pick in Mackenzie Alexander. Sure, they have young guys, but as we've seen, it's taken Xavier Rhodes, people thought was a bust for the first couple seasons. Trey Waynes is the same thing. Mackenzie Alexander kind of finally came into his own last year. And so just because Mike Hughes started out good in 6 games last year doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be able to compensate for Waynes' ability to stop the run better than any cornerback in the league. So unless they find a way to shuffle around some money, I feel like the roster won't be as strong next year as it is this year. They're kind of stacked at every position right now, and I think they're kind of screwed money wise.
You are really a glass half empty guy, aren't you? I mean, you're already on 2020. We haven't even had 2019 yet. Come on.
I know, but I'm not used to the Kendrick's like having to restructure his contract just to sign a first-round pick. I think their plan has been executed brilliantly, but this is the apex of that plan.
Yeah, that's very possible. That's why I suspect is why Kyle Rudolph is not done. You know, he's trying to squeeze every bit out of it as he can. He knows the reality. He wants to be here.
Or Barr coming back too.
They want him to be here. Yeah, they probably thought Barr was gone, and then when he came back, you know, that probably cramped their style a little bit. The Cousins thing is a killer.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that contract is like Kevin Garnett's was, I swear, at the Timberwolves how many years ago. You couldn't. That's how they struggled. They brought it. They signed the biggest contract to date in the history of the league, and then you had to try to fit in pieces around it. You know,
the Joe Smith thing didn't help either.
No, that didn't. But yes, I think they're good at. On the defensive side of the ball, Zimmer's probably going to lose some of those guys because that's who they focused on coming in. I think they are going to be good at running back, depending on how Hughes comes back from his injury. I think he is going to be good, but it's just whether or not if he's going to be healthy or not. Because ACL, sometimes it's a year before you get back, and they're not going to give up on him. Mackenzie Alexander has finally become the ball player that they thought he would be, so he's a solid guy. I wouldn't think both him and Trey Waynes would be gone. I think one of them might be gone. Depends on what they can depend on from Houghton Hill. And then you got Xavier Rhodes, who's probably got a big contract. That's and if he doesn't have a bounce back season, then it's possible they look past him.
I think he's the 4th highest paid corner in the league.
Exactly. So
$14.5 million. It's a lot.
And one of the writers on our site recently wrote this story about Linval Joseph, who's 30 and coming off surgery. I guess it was Reed that wrote it.
Reed, he owns PurpleRainNews.com if you want to check out his site. He's been doing a lot of the beat coverage for OTAs, and that was something that was sneakily I hadn't heard of until I read his article, which was this shrouded in mystery surgery for Joseph, who's 30 now. That's right. a little scary.
It was a good piece because it brought to light exactly what his situation is. I'm not sure I fully went all the way with him on him and being in a precarious situation because he is signed for the next. Let's see, I had it up here. He is signed for 2022, and in that season he has 0 dead cap money. Ooh. And that's one thing I always look at. This year, I mean, he's got 12.5 million in dead cap money. Next year, it's 2.4. Following year is 1.2, so it decreases over the years. So I would say for the next 2 years, for sure, he's not going anywhere. unless he just completely falls off the table in his production. But Zimmer loves this guy. Zimmer went after him with one of the first big free agents that he signed in his tenure here, and he is the anchor of that defense. So, that could be a spot for restructure. If he continues to play well. But
and I think he would welcome more guaranteed money as opposed to the situation now being they can cut him without any really consequence, which is kind of how NFL contracts work these days, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's like you said, I wasn't on my radar either, so I'm a little bummed at Reed to all of a sudden bum me out with possibly the big goon leaving. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, maybe I should write an article about how screwed we are in 2022. Me and Ian were doing a show. I do the Smoke Break, which is a Periscope show, kind of reactively to just big news, or I do like a pregame, a halftime, and a postgame reaction show. And so he and I started doing a show called The Lunch Break, which is a playoff of the Smoke Break, but we realized that Vikings.com releases a article or podcast or something called The Lunch Break, so we changed it to The Odd Couple. And he was thinking we should call it The Dreamer versus The Cynic, just because he and I are like oil and water in regards to just our perspective on the team and life, I think. But that's to say I'm not optimistic. I am very optimistic about this team. I think that while that article did sound... Yeah, well, I just think that this is their best chance. I do think this is the best on paper roster this team has ever had. Position by position, yeah. Yeah, they're really stacked. If you look at like just depth even, but the 22 starters that they have are amazing. But then you have special teams, and one thing that I thought was interesting news-wise was that they hired a kicking coach, which is something that when we talked to Chris Cluey about a month or 6 weeks ago or something, he kind of blew my mind by saying that in high school, college, and the pros, there aren't such things as coaches. I don't specifically remember if he said kicking coaches, but coaches that really can go to a punter or a kicker and say, okay, this is what's wrong with your mechanics, and this is how we can fix it. Right. In the day and age of analytics and Moneyball type situations and how that's affected the NFL these days, you think that they would have somebody that is like doing slow motion cameras of every kick and then analyzing the velocity and the angle and all that. But that apparently isn't the case, or I should say it wasn't the case, because it sounds like the Vikings did bring in someone to do specifically that. And while that would have never been Chris Cluey, at the end of that I said, man, you should do that because you can make a fortune doing it. But I think he's pretty much done with the NFL in general. The interesting thing is that they brought in Nate Kading to do it over... what was his name? John Kerry from the Saints was the other guy they were thinking of. And Kading is basically well known for being really, really good in the regular season and basically choking like crazy in the playoffs. So he's probably the most on-brand coach they could have brought in. But you have to wonder...
That's actually probably good then, Joe, because the Vikings didn't make the playoffs last year, so they only need a good regular season.
That's true. And see, I'm rubbing off on you, man, just little by little. You have to wonder how Dan Bailey would react to something like that as a guy who's a pretty well-established veteran who has a better kicking percentage than Kading ever did, even despite last season. I'm sure he's on board with it. I'm just speculating, but at the same time, you would have to think that, like, I'm using my personal experience, like, as a salesperson when I worked for the startup job board that I did. About 3 years into it, I was the number one salesperson out of, like, 85 people, and they brought in a consultant that they paid a ton of money, basically, to listen to us on the phone and tell us what we were doing wrong, and I really did not like it, because he was painting with a very broad brush and ignoring success that other people had and what worked, and basically just because he wrote a book, making us read the book and do it his way.
That's apples to oranges, because he was brought in to talk to those other people, not necessarily to you.
Well, that's true. I mean, it did affect me, but it was a whole bunch of people versus one person. But I also could see how he might not necessarily like it.
I think what's his name, Bailey's on board because he's late in his career and he knows he didn't do what he needed to do. He didn't even keep up his own average, which has always been a great one of the top ones in NFL history. He dropped and he was had an off season. He's got another contract. They want him to be the guy. Maybe it's nothing more than having someone that he can go talk to, because the special teams coordinator's got so many other things going on when he's got to, do the punt and kick return, the kickoff and kick return. There's a lot of other players that guy's responsible for. Here's a guy that, when everybody else is doing something, these guys are off in the field doing things, he can really hone in on his mechanics, and he's someone to bounce ideas off or say, hey, this looks like it's doing that. And I don't think I ever saw Prefer over there just grinding on any of his kickers mechanics to that degree, and so I think it's a fine thing. If someone has like Kading has been successful and in some regards as a kicker, I don't think it can hurt. And if Bailey's got a problem with it, then he's a dummy because he's getting paid very well to do his job. And this way, Zimmer doesn't know what to say to him. Zimmer's certainly not an offensive guy, and he's certainly not a special teams kicker guy to go and say, hey, other than scowl at him, he's got not really much to say on how to fix it.
I completely agree with what you just said, and I was going to say that's probably the best example of why I consider you my mentor and life coach and soulmate in regards to this Viking stuff, because you just completely changed my negative perception of it.
Speaking of Zimmer, it's his birthday today. The Scholar is 63. He's out playing golf, so I wonder how that's going.
And my birthday is on Friday, and he's in better shape than I am. Go figure. But I agree with you completely. I think it shows, or it's a continuation of what I was saying earlier, which is this team is really pulling out all the stops to ensure they're checking all the boxes possible. Mm-hmm. And that's part of, I don't want to keep going back to that all-in theory, but it does seem like they're really, really, really trying. And from an ownership perspective, I appreciate the effort.
Yes, absolutely.
More than anything. Have you ever interacted with Kevin Warren at all?
No, I've been at events where he's been at. I've heard him speak, before, but to be on a one-on-one personal interviewing level, no, I have not. It seems like a nice guy, though.
Unless you take Adrian Peterson's word for it.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Which I never understood what his beef was with Kevin Warren.
Yeah, me neither. I don't know if it had to do with, maybe that's some guy that Adrian maybe thought should have had his back more in the situation that he was in at the time. But I don't know. And Kevin Warren is a straight shooter, and obviously the news of the day proves that out, that he's done some things right in his career. He's like a glass breaker, as they say. He's the first guy to have a position that he had with the Vikings in I want to say professional sports, but I don't know if that's true. But
I know for sure it was the NFL.
Certainly the NFL, and now he's the first. What is his title here for the?
He's the Big Ten commissioner, so he's the first black commissioner for any Power 5 conference.
So that means your dad are just giddy as hell.
I was just gonna say, as you know, the Big Ten is the best conference, so that's even better.
They say that, I've heard it said by Barrera was saying on the radio yesterday. It's probably the most powerful. One of the most powerful positions in college sports.
For sure. It's SEC and Big Ten kind of run the whole thing. And they just make tremendous amounts of money. Like Maryland, for example, their sports department was going bankrupt before they joined the Big Ten. That was the big thing for them, and now they're just flush with cash. And then you look at teams like Nebraska, who were bragging how they were going to dominate the Big Ten. It's a different thing, but they've been terrible ever since, which makes me incredibly happy. Have you had a chance to see Marcus Epps play at all? He was the sixth-round pick out of Wyoming, and it sounds like he's really been. I saw on Slack you mentioned that he broke up a pass from Cousins, which was part of an article that was written about him, and they asked him about that, and he was just talking about how basically, despite the fact that he's playing really well, he just can't believe how lightning fast everybody is, and he's really trying to adjust and rely on his instincts. But he's the type of guy who's exciting, I think, just going back to what we were saying about the cornerback position, because he can also play the nickel position. And I feel like Kubiak's big thing with players is the ability to kill two birds with one stone, like players that can play multiple positions, like Curse playing hybrid linebacker, safety, nickel, like he'll make the team because of that. Having a wide receiver that can return punts as well will probably be the determining factor between who's the sixth and who's the cut. And so everyone's hyping up Epps, and I wasn't sure if you had a chance to kind of see what he's all about.
Well, it's funny that you say that about versatility. And last year at I don't know if it was out at TCO, I asked Mike Zimmer that specific question, and he kind of lit up, and I just said, there's got to be more value to guys that can play more than one position back there, safety to corner, and he goes, yes, absolutely, because you're, with injuries and constant things that happen in the league. I mean, a guy, and it affords you position flexibility. It affords you matchup flexibility. So it's a huge deal on defense as well as offense. As far as Epps, on that day I saw him last week, he coming into there, Zimmer was talking on KFan, and I think PA had asked him about who he had liked what he'd seen so far, and he mentioned Epps specifically, who has been having a great, OTAs so far. And then I go to the practice, and Epps is getting some run with the ones, and we were standing behind the end zone, and he made this nice play in the end zone by to break up this pass. And it was almost a reaching, stretching, not quite diving play, but it was a play that he all of a sudden had to break on the ball and knock it out at the last minute, which was a sure touchdown. And we all wrote down about it. I mentioned it in one of my wrap-ups, and it was a big deal. I haven't, when the coaches already got your eye, and then you go later that day and make a big play like that for him that breaks up a touchdown against his own offense. I think you're only going to get more playing time. So yeah, he's definitely a guy worth keeping an eye on, I believe.
So to end the show, I was wondering what your and yours might be different because you've experienced a lot more games than I have, but if you could take one transaction or one play and change it, and I guess with the outcome being the most positive impact or the most positive change to the trajectory of the franchise, what would it be? Whether it's, I think, trading Tarkenton the first time or...
Well, that's interesting. I didn't go quite back that far, but now when you mention it, I couldn't point to a play in any of those Super Bowls because none of them were very close. So one of them, not too many one plays would make a difference. But I know what my dad's one play would be the Vikings not sitting on it as going into half against the Atlanta Falcons in 1998, because he and I got tickets to the game. We were down on the fourth row in the end zone, right underneath the crossbar where Gary Anderson missed later on. But Cunningham faded back when they had the lead, and some guy blew in and knocked the ball out of his hand. They recovered the fumble and went in for a score before halftime, and that's how Atlanta started their comeback, which was probably a bigger deal than sitting on the ball at the end of regulation, and even every bit as much as Gary Anderson's miss. But my play would have been one of two in the New Orleans game, was the handoff between Favre and AP right up down at the goal line before half.
It was Reggie Bush fumbled the punt.
Correct. If they take that in, the whole tenor of that game changes. They have a huge lead at halftime, and then they can just sit on them the rest of the way. And it's either that or Favre thrown across the chest, the same thing. Either one of those things, I think, would have changed that game for sure, and they would have got to a Super Bowl that they probably would have won if Favre could walk.
See, I almost went with that, the Favre across the body to Sidney Rice thing. But I thought this at the time when the game was going on, through my rage as I was holding on to a Miracles Happen rock that people put out in their garden, and I remember throwing it and denting the wall out. Like, this rock sucks. I thought then, and I still think that had we won that game, or had they won that game rather, that Favre wouldn't have been able to play in the Super Bowl because he was still relatively injured going into training camp that next year, and his ankle was just jacked. And it is Favre, and they probably would have shot it full of cortisone.
Absolutely.
But I'm not sure that things would have, at full strength, I think they would have beat the Colts for sure. I
think so too.
The way that they outplayed the Saints, they had 525 yards versus like 175, and the Saints basically had a pretty easy time with the Colts. I think they would have won that game. Now, I went a little different, and I said the trade of Randy Moss, and I thought that, a lot of people look at 2004, and Culpepper was the runner-up for the MVP. He had 39 touchdowns and like 11 interceptions, and Moss, quote-unquote, only had 13 of those touchdowns, but he only played in 13 of those games, and he had a hammy and a ankle injury that year, and that they traded him right after the mooning incident, which I think was a huge part of it, or at least a huge part of them being able to sell it to the fan base, because for whatever reason that offended a lot of people, and I still don't understand that, and that's a good way for me to determine whether or not I like somebody personally. Now, I just look at 2005 and Culpepper's knee injury. And,
I got 2005 written down here, Joe.
Yeah, I mean,
draft picks.
Yes, they wouldn't have had Troy Williamson. They would have kept Moss. Moss obviously didn't play well in Oakland, but look what he did in New England. And I mean, this is really going out on a limb, but Culpepper, I think they were 2-5 going into the Carolina game where he was injured, and the offense was terrible. They didn't know what to do without the Randy ratio, which I think people took out of context. So he was trying to basically do things all by himself, and got hit by Chris Gamble as he was scrambling across like the 50. That probably wouldn't have happened if he had Moss, and then we could have actually had a quarterback that was developed and drafted by the team with Randy Moss for the bulk of his career. That's always been my argument for Moss versus Jerry Rice. You have Joe Montana and Steve Young, 1 and 2. Then you have, for Moss, guys like Gus Frerotte and Spurgeon Wynn and like all these just terrible. I mean, I was a Frerotte guy actually, but so on and so forth. So that's my biggest thing. And
I'm going to kill you with this. You brought up 2005, and I had to accept the trading of Moss, which was a bummer at the time. But his career up to that point was certainly checkered off the field, but never on it. So he made it. I don't want to say palatable, but at some point you could say, okay, well, it's not going to get any better here, but whatever. They make the trade, and they draft Troy Williamson and Erasmus James in that first round of the 2005 draft, and they could have had Aaron Rodgers. They had 2 shots at him. Just sit with that for a little while.
Yeah.
Listeners, go ahead and light me up for that one. I don't care. But if you think about that for any moment, and Culpepper gets hurt, his career is basically over. You got Aaron Rodgers steps in after that one season, and suddenly, the franchise is all those dead years that the Vikings have are suddenly better before they get Favre. So I don't know.
That's a really good point, and it reminds me of it's like the Vikings Steph Curry situation where they had the Rubio and Johnny. Oh yeah, that's what I meant. The Timberwolves had Johnny Flynn and Ricky Rubio.
Bring those guys up, yeah. That just kills me every time they're in the playoff or we come to the end of the finals and see Stephon Curry. 2 shots at him.
Yikes. That's Minnesota summed up, if you want to know why I am the super cynical, blackened heart person on this show. That's why, but dang it, things are going to change this year, right?
Right on, brother.
Yes. Thanks everybody for checking in. I want to thank everybody on iHeartRadio for listening. We've been getting bigger and bigger. I have noticed that people prefer when it's you and I versus guest hosts. So that's really the way it usually is. We don't do that very often.
Yeah, take that, Kirby.
Definitely, but I want to thank our sponsors, Grey Duck Vodka. Check out our social media and our website. They're doing a ton of promotional stuff. They're sponsoring a lot of events like Summer Jam, for example, which I think is at Canterbury or Mystic Lake. I forget. It'll be on the website, but they're doing a lot of stuff. They'll be doing a bottle signing and a tasting at McDonald's Liquor right around training camp. And McDonald's Liquor is in the Nokomis neighborhood off of 62 and 34th. That should be really fun. During that bottle signing / tasting, there'll also be a silent auction with some of the coolest Vikings and Twins stuff you'll ever see. They from Total Sports Entertainment. Go to totalsportsentertainment.com or just Google it. You can buy stuff directly off their website. But Joe, you were there for our day 2 draft party, and they had some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen, bar none. I mean,
absolutely, there's some great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you could create something in a lab that perfectly for you as a Vikings fan, they have it. Signed helmets from Randy Moss, Cousins, Thielen, Rudolph, purple People Eaters jersey with all 4 of the defensive lineman numbers.
Just amazed where they get all these things, but boy, they have
I
know.
A lot of, they're good at forging. But yeah, thanks to them. And also, I want to shout out Twins Daily and John Bonus and his show Gleeman and the Geek. We have really kind of heavily partnered with Twins Daily, and we're sharing a lot of content both on Purple Territory Radio. We're hosting Gleeman and the Geek there. Kirby O'Connor, who is the managing editor of Purple PTSD, is writing for Twins Daily now, doing some Twins coverage. And the Twins are actually exceeding expectations, something that we're not really used to around here. So we'll be giving you guys some updates on Twin stuff on the websites too, which should be pretty fun, at least till the season starts. So check out Twins Daily, listen to Gleeman and the Geek, get drunk while you're doing it, and then buy some Vikings merch is the point I'm trying to make. But this has been Morning Joes for Wednesday, the 5th of June. Happy early birthday to me. And I will catch you guys, we will catch you guys next Tuesday. Skol!